There is a feeling most people recognize but almost no one talks about honestly. It is not sadness exactly. It is not depression, though it can lead there. It is a particular kind of ache, a sense that something essential is missing, that you are somehow cut off from the world even when other people are physically nearby. You can feel it in a crowded room. You can feel it in a long marriage. You can feel it while scrolling through images of other people's lives at midnight. We call it loneliness. And for most of human history, we treated it as a personal failing, an emotional inconvenience, or at best a philosophical condition to be endured with quiet dignity. What science has discovered in the last several decades is something far more alarming. Loneliness is not just a feeling. It is a biological state, and when it persists long enough, it begins to systematically dismantle the human body from the inside. To understand why, you have to go back to the environment in which the human nervous system was built. Your ancestors did not survive alone. For the vast majority of human evolutionary history, social connection was not a luxury or a preference. It was the primary survival mechanism. A human being separated from the group faced predators it could not fight alone, cold it could not survive alone, and hunger it could not resolve alone. Social bonds were not just emotionally important, they were the difference between living and dying. And so the brain evolved a system, a dedicated biological alarm, designed to signal when social connection was in danger. When the system detected isolation, it triggered a cascade of physiological changes designed to motivate the isolated individual to reconnect. To seek safety in others before the isolation became fatal, that alarm is loneliness. John Cacioppo, the neuroscientist who spent more than 2 decades studying the biology of loneliness at the University of Chicago, described it as a biological signal as fundamental as hunger or thirst. When you are hungry, your body is telling you that you need food. When you are thirsty, your body is telling you that you need water. When you are lonely, your body is telling you something equally urgent. You need human connection. And just as chronic hunger and chronic thirst damage the body, chronic loneliness damages the body. Not metaphorically, physically. The mechanisms are now well documented. When the brain perceives social isolation, it activates the same stress response your ancestors would have used to survive an attack. Cortisol floods the system. The immune system enters a state of chronic low-grade inflammation, a kind of sustained defensive readiness that is useful in short bursts, but deeply destructive when it runs for months or years. The cardiovascular system comes under sustained stress. Sleep architecture is disrupted. The brain begins to perceive the world differently, scanning the environment more vigilantly for social threats, interpreting neutral social signals as potentially hostile, withdrawing further from the connection it needs most. This is one of the most tragic features of loneliness. It is self-perpetuating. The very neurological changes it produces make it harder to escape. The lonely brain becomes a hypervigilant brain, one that sees rejection everywhere and interprets ambiguity as hostility. A colleague who does not wave back is ignoring you. A friend who takes too long to reply has withdrawn. A social invitation that feels uncertain is probably a polite gesture rather than genuine warmth. The lonely person gradually retreats from the social world, not because they want to, but because their nervous system is telling them it is too dangerous to stay. Cacioppo's research found that chronically lonely people experience measurably worse sleep, with more micro-awakenings during the night because the ancient part of the brain responsible for threat detection never fully powers down. In the ancestral environment, sleeping alone was genuinely dangerous. The brain that kept one ear open all night, that slept lightly and woke easily, was the brain that survived. That same vigilance, running in a modern isolated person lying in a safe apartment in a city of millions, produces fragmented, unrestorative sleep night after night. And the effects compound. Poor sleep raises cortisol. Raised cortisol increases inflammation. Sustained inflammation damages the cardiovascular system, suppresses immune function, and accelerates cellular aging. Researchers studying telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes that shorten as we age, have found that loneliness accelerates telomere shortening, which is one of the most direct biological markers of aging at the cellular level. Chronic loneliness, in the most literal biological sense, makes you older faster. The mortality data is stark. A 2015 meta-analysis by Julianne Holt-Lundstad and her colleagues, examining data from more than 3 million people across dozens of studies, found that social isolation and loneliness were associated with a 26 to 32% increased risk of premature death. To put that in perspective, that effect size is comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day and exceeds the mortality risk associated with obesity. Loneliness is not a minor inconvenience. It is a major risk factor for early death, one that most people and most health systems still do not take seriously. But here is something that changes the picture significantly. Loneliness is not the same as being alone. This distinction matters enormously. Solitude, the experience of being alone by choice, with a sense of control and connection to one's own inner life, does not produce the physiological effects of loneliness. Many people live with relatively little social contact and experience little loneliness. What appears to trigger the biological alarm is not the objective quantity of social interaction, but the subjective sense of social disconnection, the feeling that your connections are inadequate, that no one truly knows you, that you are somehow outside the circle even when you are physically inside it. This is why social media use, despite dramatically increasing the quantity of social stimulation available to people, has not reduced loneliness and in some studies has been associated with increases. Scrolling through curated presentations of other people's social lives does not satisfy the deeper need for genuine reciprocal connection. It may in fact intensify the sense of disconnection, creating a vivid contrast between the apparent warmth of others' relationships and the felt poverty of one's own. The quality of connection matters far more than the quantity. A single close relationship, one person who genuinely knows you and with whom you feel truly seen, appears to be far more protective against the biological effects of loneliness than a broad but shallow social network. This is why people can feel profoundly lonely in marriages, in large families, in cities of millions, in offices full of colleagues. The ache is not for more people. It is for the particular quality of being truly known. There is something almost unbearably poignant about this when you sit with it. The biological system that evolved to keep your ancestors connected to the group, to signal danger when that connection was threatened, is still running in every modern human. And for a growing number of people in the modern world, it is running constantly. Not because they are surrounded by predators, but because the modern environment has made genuine connection increasingly difficult to sustain. Rates of loneliness have increased dramatically in recent decades across the developed world. In 2018, a survey by the health insurer Cigna found that nearly half of Americans reported sometimes or always feeling alone. In the United Kingdom, loneliness had become severe enough by 2018 that the government appointed a minister for loneliness. Among the elderly, among young adults, among people in cities, and among people in rural isolation, the biological alarm is sounding at epidemic levels. What can be done? The research points to a few things that matter more than others. First, the quality of existing relationships. Investing in depth rather than breadth. Pursuing the specific uncomfortable vulnerability of allowing oneself to be truly known by another person appears to be the most direct antidote to the biological effects of loneliness. This is not easy. The hypervigilant lonely brain actively resists it, but the evidence suggests it is necessary. Second, the recognition that loneliness is a biological signal and not a character flaw. The shame that surrounds loneliness is itself a barrier to addressing it. People who feel ashamed of their loneliness withdraw further, are less likely to seek help, and are less likely to initiate the connections that might relieve it. Understanding that the ache of loneliness is the body doing its job, running an ancient alarm designed to save your life, may make it slightly easier to respond to that signal rather than simply endure it. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the understanding that loneliness is contagious. Cacioppo and his colleagues found that loneliness spreads through social networks, that lonely people gradually make the people around them lonelier, and that entire communities can tip into states of widespread disconnection that are far harder to reverse than to prevent. This is perhaps the most important public health insight of the loneliness research. Loneliness is not just a private suffering, it is a social condition that spreads, that compounds, and that requires a social response. The person beside you who seems withdrawn, difficult, or socially awkward may not be unfriendly. They may be lonely, and their nervous system may be doing exactly what evolution designed it to do, protecting a vulnerable organism from a world that feels too dangerous to fully enter. The ancient alarm is still sounding. In apartments and nursing homes and offices and bedrooms, in cities full of people who pass each other without speaking, in a world more connected by technology than any previous generation and more lonely than almost any of them, the signal has not changed in 200,000 years. We need each other. We have always needed each other. The biology has not forgotten. Only the world around it has.